Welcome to another episode of From the Hart, and in today's episode, we're going to bring our audience our interview with Denise Brown.
Yeah.
And for those who are familiar, back in the mid-'90s with the trial of the century, the Brown family was thrust into the limelight, not through their choice, but unfortunately at the hands of someone else. And the focus of our interview, I believe, Todd, with Denise, really takes us from that tragedy that they dealt with into maybe not triumph completely, because they'll never bring Nicole and Ron Goldman back.
True.
But it's what they've done with it that has inspired me, and I think hopefully will inspire our audience as well. What about you?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on takeaway from that?
The biggest thing out of all of this, like what we're trying to do with the show, is bring the humanity out of all these people that are extremely talented business leaders or entertainers or whatever, or just dealt with extreme personal situations. And the thing that comes to the surface in this interview that you didn't think about in that time, or at least I didn't, and a lot of us didn't, was that there was a family affected.
Right.
And she brings a humanity to a situation that we've seen on a kind of like a circus scale, the way that it was it was brought
It really
out.
was a circus.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, and getting to hear her side of it and where she's gone from there, it's just phenomenal, and it's inspiring. And I think our audience is going to really get a lot out of this.
Yeah, and what I hope is that the leaders who are watching and listening to this podcast will take the example of the Brown family and Denise of, hey, when something bad happens, and this is about as bad as it gets, there's still a way to turn these lemons into lemonade, as they say. And so I'm excited for you to watch and to listen to our interview with Denise Brown.
Okay, hi, I'm Denise Brown. You're watching From the Hart with Ed Hart.
Denise, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and just kind of the things that you've been up to? And you came into the spotlight 25 years ago, but really we want to talk more about not so much why that happened, but what are you doing now?
That was the unfortunate side of it.
Right.
And yes, getting thrown into the spotlight because of a tragedy is not the way to get into a spotlight for anybody or anything. But, you know, we had a whole other life before that. I mean, our life, I was born in Germany.
Right.
A lot of people don't know that. You know, I think I may have said it a few times on a couple of interviews, but I lived there until I was 6 years old.
Right.
You know, I didn't speak a word of English when I got here. You know, Nicole and I, we both lived there, or we were both born there. Lived there. I lived there until I was 6. She was 4. And, you know, not speaking a word of English, getting thrown into a school, and all of a sudden speaking English after 3 weeks. Which is pretty impressive,
Sure.
I think. But see, that just goes to show you, I mean, little kids, they have like a sponge for a brain. I mean, they can really, you know, they can remember
We learned a lot in
things
those
and
first few
learn
years.
things, which is really great. Yeah. So anyway, so we ended up coming here to California and moving to Long Beach first.
Sure.
And then moving our way to Garden Grove. And stayed there for about 10 years and grew up there. And then, of course, the girls became teenagers.
Yeah.
The girls, I mean Nicole and I.
Right, exactly.
Because there was 2 other girls.
Right, Dominique and Tanya are younger. How much younger are they than you?
Dominique and Tanya, 7 and 12
Okay,
years
so quite a
younger.
bit younger.
So Dominique is 7 years younger than I am. Tanya, 12. And so the 2 older girls, we wanted to go to the beach. We liked the beach.
Take us to the beach, and Dad took you to the beach.
And he did.
Excellent.
You know, so we ended up moving out of Garden Grove, moving down to the beach. I ended up graduating from Dana Hills High School.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought it was the coolest high school ever because it was all indoors.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, my God, this is so
Ironic, you're at the beach and the
great.
school's indoors.
Yeah, but I mean, what I loved about it was that the old school that I went to, Rancho Alamitos, everything was outside.
Yeah.
And being the girl that I am, I have curly, frizzy hair.
Indoors was good for you.
So I really loved the fact that I could be indoors, I could have the straight hair, and I didn't have to worry about my hair.
Nice.
You know, so just normal girl.
Normal childhood. Is
Yeah,
there anything that kind
normal
of sticks out? Like
childhood.
maybe fun things or stories about you and Nicole growing up and just as sisters? I'm sure there's a lot of things you could or wouldn't share, certainly. But and it just kind of memories of her that just when you think about her, it just really warms your heart and makes you smile.
Oh, God, there's so many.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the things that we did, you know, thank God I graduated already and I have my diploma. So I can talk about these things now.
Exactly. Can't get in trouble anymore, right?
Yeah, being at Dana Hills High School, you had physical education down at the beach. Okay,
Nice.
that was my 4th period.
Nice.
I had a 5th period. when I wanted to go.
Yeah, exactly. When you weren't sunning on the beach.
When there was no sun, I would go to my 5th period class. When there was sun, we would all just continue and we'd stay
The teachers
down at
just
the
knew
beach.
if the clouds are not out, then the kids aren't coming to the 5th period.
Yeah, so anyway. I ended
Excellent.
up passing anyway. I ended up getting my diploma,
Yeah.
but I never went to college.
Okay.
I just
You got a much
school
bigger
was just
education, fortunately and unfortunately as well, from some of the experiences in your life.
well, you know what? I got to travel. I got lucky.
Yeah.
I got very fortunate in being able to travel around the world, and with the job that I had.
Sure.
And so I was able to travel. I lived in Paris for a year. I lived in England. I lived in Italy. Lived over in Japan for a couple of months. And
Yeah.
so I was able to see the world with the
Sure.
work that I was doing. So that side of it was amazing.
So talk about
Yeah.
that. What were you doing pre-1994? And then certainly,
Oh.
how did that just dramatically launch you in a different direction?
Pre-1994, I went to, I don't know if people remember this because, I'm old now, but the Ontario Speedway
Oh, yeah.
in
Absolutely.
1974. I met a guy at the Ontario Speedway, and back in the day, Denise used to give her phone number to everybody that would ask. And so he asked me, he says, he was trying to climb up on the fence, and I was waiting for, I don't know if you remember this band either. God, I'm aging myself. Black Oak, Arkansas.
I do not actually. All right.
Okay. I loved Black Oak, Arkansas.
Wow.
There was one song that they used to sing. And I was up on a fence waiting for them at the Ontario Speedway. And all of a sudden, this guy, he tries to climb up on the fence. I mean, we were squished in like sardines anyway,
Sure.
right? And he tries to climb up. And I'm like, what do you want? Why are you coming up here? There's no room for you. And so anyhow, so he continued to climb up, and he just stood there and he tried to have a conversation. And I said, get away from me and just let me listen to my music, right? Climb down. He said, listen, he goes, do you want to be a model? I said, excuse me?
Sounds like a
I
line,
said,
right?
people warn me about people
There you
like
go.
you,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you just don't hear somebody saying that, especially at a concert like that. And I said, no. I said, I'm going to be a flight attendant. I
Nice.
wanted to be a flight attendant. And then all of a sudden, he says, well, can I just have your phone number? And being
He just cut to the chase. Yeah.
Being Denise, I gave him my telephone number. So it was about 2 months later, I get this phone call. Hey, remember me at the concert? I've got this photographer from Spain that would like to do a story on you and take some pictures.
Wow.
Well, that's how the whole thing started. Hence, I started modeling. I was able to travel around the world, and it was fun. It was not a life, it was not a life choice that I made. It was just kind of something that happened.
Sure.
That fell into my lap. And then, I did that, and then all of a sudden I also had my son.
Yeah.
I have a child, and now I'm a grandmother as well.
Well, congratulations. It's
Yeah.
great, isn't it? I have 7 grandsons myself, so being a grandparent
7?
is the best thing.
I have
yeah.
2.
All right, well, you'll catch up. Yeah.
Grandson, granddaughter.
Excellent.
And, so life just kind of got me out of the modeling side of it
Sure.
into being a mother, doing everything you can for your kids.
Sure.
And then I had a boy. So, of course, having a boy, I had to like insects, and I had to like camping.
Force yourself to do all these things in the dirt that you didn't like before. Sure.
And I had to do these things, because I told my mom, I said, we are not going to make a sissy out of this kid. He is going to be a
Nice.
boy. And so he's going to be a boy. So anyway, hence the, all this sports. And then I had friends, thank God, that surfed, that loved jet skiing, that loved, skiing, that loved all that kind of
Right.
stuff. So the things that I didn't do, the sports
He
that
could
I
get
didn't
those
do,
experiences.
he could get those with them.
Excellent.
Yeah, so it was really, it was fun.
Cool.
So then, fast forward to 1994.
Yeah.
My nightmare of all nightmares.
Yeah. So can share with us what you can. Obviously, we've talked in the past about warning signs that you may have seen, early on. And because I think Nicole was right out of high school, wasn't she, when that relationship
she was.
began?
Yeah. And
Tell us about how when you first maybe had some suspicion that maybe her life was, maybe not her life was in danger, but certainly that there was some red flags about that relationship that worried you.
that was the one thing that I testified to on the stand.
Okay.
And that was the biggest red flag because we got thrown out of the house.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, was the introduction to a monster.
Sure.
And that scared me because, I mean, it's interesting because I don't know if any abuser looks any different.
Right.
Because they've got this non-look in their eyes.
Yeah.
And it's like their veins are pulsating. There's such a disconnect that, they I don't know. I mean, they don't even look like the people that, you once knew and loved,
Sure.
and had in your life. So it was a real eye-opening experience.
I've heard you talk in the past about how he came across a little bit charming. And obviously there was an attraction that Nicole had. Nicole was a beautiful woman, homecoming queen, and certainly very, came from a very, nice family and raised well. Certainly wasn't really, I've heard that some women will be attracted to that type because of a past, and I don't see that at all in Nicole's past. Right.
No.
And so what do you think attracted her to him other than maybe the fame, perhaps?
You know what? I don't know if it was even the fame.
Okay.
I think she was just attracted to the guy.
Yeah.
His charisma, his charm, his the way he, treated her. I mean, when he was good, he was good.
Sure. Well, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
And, I can even say that.
Yeah.
Does it choke me to say that?
Well, of course. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It does choke me now to say that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there were good times in their relationship. They had good times.
Right.
When I first met them was actually the first red flag.
Okay.
And that was when Nicole told me after about 9 months of dating, she says, I have a boyfriend. And I go, oh, you do?
And she's 18 or 19 years old
She's
at this
18,
point.
yeah. Well, maybe 19 now.
Yeah.
I have a boyfriend and I want you to meet him. I said, okay. And she says, he's a football player. I said, okay. What do we know about football? I mean, come on, we're 4 girls, right?
Exactly.
So what do we know? Nothing.
Right.
He's a football player. I said, oh, okay. He's black. And I said, okay.
Okay.
So what's the
so far, no concerns, right? Yeah.
Zero concerns.
Yeah.
Because we were raised in a family. All of our whole family.
Yeah.
I mean, we have Mexican, we have Jewish, we have black, we have probably every religion.
The United Nations
and
within your family.
Race,
Absolutely.
in our family. So it's like, okay, so none of these things were red flags. None of these things were concerns until I got there, and all of a sudden he was down on the football field.
So he was still playing in the NFL at that point?
He was still playing, yeah. He was with the Buffalo Bills.
Okay.
And all of a sudden he was telling a guy, one of his teammates, hey, that's my girl up there, because we were in the bleachers.
Sure.
And at that exact moment, a friend of theirs kissed Nicole on the cheek, because that's what we do. We're European,
European,
okay?
absolutely.
We kiss on the cheek, we say hello. And we don't just shake hands with somebody unless we don't know them.
Right.
Then we shake hands. And so these guys were longtime friends of both of theirs. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, that night...
Just set him off, huh?
Set him off like you have no idea. Wow. Nicole was upstairs in the bathroom crying, and they had made figurines of him, right, at the time.
Okay.
And she took this figurine. I went into the bathroom, and I heard her crying. She took the figurine, and she threw it into the bathtub. She goes, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. And I go, Nicole, I said, what the heck is going on? And then she proceeded to tell me why he was so upset, and it was because of the kiss on the cheek, because she embarrassed him.
Something that you didn't think of, she didn't think of, it was just natural.
No, because it was something that they always do, because even he was friends of this guy's. Yeah. Okay, so it was not some complete stranger, but she embarrassed him. Okay, so here we go. She embarrassed him. She goes downstairs. She goes and speaks to him, and all of a sudden she comes up and she goes, "Oh, everything's okay." And I go, what do you mean everything's okay? She goes, it was my fault. I embarrassed him. And I said, oh, okay. Well, not knowing anything about domestic violence.
Sure.
I said, okay, but God, that's a hell of a reaction. You know what I mean? It's like, why would somebody react like that?
Yeah.
It's so insane. And so anyhow, we ended up going out that night. She was fine with him. Everything was okay. Next day, I said, Nick, I said, are you sure you don't want to come back to New York with me? Because I was living in New York at the time. And she goes, no. She goes, everything's okay. I said, are you sure? And she goes, yes. I said, okay. Never another mention, never another word about this, never, nothing. So I said, okay. I said, everything is great in their relationship. They're still together, and they're back in Los Angeles.
So that's
I went back to New York.
So that's 1982.
That was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. I believe
so.
so.
And so
Or
obviously it's
earlier
12 years
even.
later that, all of this comes to a head. What other warning signs did you maybe see in those next 12 years where maybe you had that Nick conversation again and maybe asked her or noticed some behaviors?
Well, there was another when they moved into their house in Brentwood,
Okay.
and all of a sudden I'm in Nicole's bathroom, and I open up a drawer, and I see a Polaroid. If you guys remember Polaroids,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
I see a Polaroid picture. I look at it and I go, "Oh my God!" And I see a black eye. And she goes, "Oh my God!" She goes, "Isn't that great?" And I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Oh, the studio painted the black eye on my face."
Wow.
And I said, "Oh my God." I said, "It looks so real." And I took the picture and I threw it back into the drawer. I closed the drawer.
Thought nothing
and
of
I
it
just,
at the time.
Well, we
Why would
weren't
you?
raised
Right.
in a family. We never even heard my mom and dad yell at each other.
Right.
So why would I think that there was anything going on? Besides, his eruption years
The
before
one
that.
you saw a couple years back. Yeah. Or what have you. Sure.
So, I mean, okay, it happens. Things happen. A studio, makeup artist, yeah, it's believable. He was making a movie.
Right.
Okay. So, we sit there and you just kind of go, okay, great. Good
Interesting.
job.
Yeah, very nice makeup.
You know?
Yeah, obviously we know that picture was one that was used later on, right? Was that the
It
one that
was
was
used later on, yeah.
So a couple
Yeah.
things that you mentioned there that I wanted to kind of go back to. You talked about how that incident initially, where the next day she's like, "Oh, it's no big deal, we're fine,"
Yeah.
or "Oh yeah, that was
Even
just
that
a
night.
yeah, that's just a
Yeah.
picture that was made up," as you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find in the research and in the work that you've done since '94 and in the last 25 years that those are pretty common things that you'll see in victims of domestic abuse, where they will defend the harmer or make up excuses or stories that weren't real? Why? So you're saying yes. Why is that? Do you think?
They do. Well, because what happens is, and it was a police officer that explained this to me,
Okay.
and it was really interesting because I thought, okay, a New York cop, he's sitting here talking to me, we're having a conversation, and he says, "Denise, domestic violence calls are the most dangerous calls that a police officer goes on." I sat there and I go, "Why?" I said, "You guys have guns. You go
Yeah, you
in.
think you're very protected,
Yeah,
sure.
you're protected." And he goes, "No." He goes, "Because what happens is," he went on a call, so he just explained this call to me. "You go in there. The woman is arrest him, arrest him, arrest him. So you go towards the guy. You want to go and arrest him. Sure enough, didn't I have a chair broken over my back?" I said, "What?" "Broken over my back because the thing that happens when an abuser goes behind bars or they get arrested, within a few hours, they get out.
Sure.
Who is to blame after that? The victim.
Right.
You made this happen. This happened because of you." And then she gets a bigger beating than she had actually had in the first place because it was all her fault.
And he knows the pattern that the last time I did this, she's going to stand up for me the next day. So she's going to do it again and start to feel
And-
kind of that shame and that almost like it's her fault.
Shame is huge when it
Yeah.
comes to domestic violence. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a word that I hear with so many domestic violence victims. I mean, the shame of not wanting anyone to know, the shame
Sure.
of not wanting to, expose, especially if they're a doctor or a politician or a judge, or because anybody can be an abuser.
Right.
There's not,
There's not an MO that you can just look at and say, "Oh, that's the guy or that's the girl," or what
I mean,
have you.
you'd be surprised because I've
Yeah.
had phone calls from news anchors, from politicians' wives, from, it's all walks of life that domestic violence affects. So, this was something that was all new.
Sure.
It was so new to me. And then I had to get educated when my sister was murdered.
Right.
And that was, okay, I saw a few things. Did I think anything of them? No, because I didn't know what domestic violence was.
Yeah.
And when we went to a shelter, my mother and I, we went to a shelter, Human Options,
Okay.
in
Oh,
Laguna
yeah.
Beach.
Yeah.
They were in
Know them
Laguna
well.
Beach at
Sure.
the time. And I said, okay, what is this? Because my dad found her notes and diaries.
Okay.
And so I started reading them, and I said, I said, this isn't possible.
This didn't
I
happen. This
threw
couldn't
him
have
back
happened.
on the
Sure.
bed, and I said, this did not happen to my sister because she would have told me.
Exactly.
Okay? And a lot of siblings, a lot of people that, in families, they think, okay, well, why didn't they tell me? Why did she say? It's all these why questions that they do.
And why didn't I spot it?
Well, that never came into my into my psyche or my whatever,
you
my
never really
head,
thought that,
because I never lived it.
True.
We never lived it. We never had it in our family. So I never said any of that. But I just said, well, why didn't she tell me?
Right.
Why didn't she tell me all this stuff was going on? Like I was going to be the hero to get her out. I don't know. I didn't know anything about it. How was I even going to even try to do that? That was, you got to remember, this was 25 years ago when all this stuff was going down. And 25 years ago, they didn't have the laws that they have today.
Yeah.
It happened to poor and homeless people.
Yeah, this wasn't something that happened to middle, upper class families.
No. And it just didn't exist like that, I mean, everybody thought poor and homeless. You read it in the newspaper, and you just go, oh, my God, those poor people.
Right.
Those poor people.
Exactly.
Not, that it could happen in your own family.
Right.
So you sit there and you just go, this is impossible. How did something like this happen when we were so close, when we would talk about everything and anything, growing up, talking about boys, talking about, our relationships, talking
girl
about,
stuff.
The girl stuff, our
sisters
dreams, our hopes, our whatever. And my sister always wanted the white picket fence.
Sure.
Always a white picket fence. That's what her life was. And, she didn't get that white picket fence. She didn't get that, that.
She thought she was heading towards that, obviously.
Yeah, she did. And, unfortunately, circumstances changed. And, people don't really. I mean, come on, this person was in our life for 17 years.
Right.
And do you really think that somebody in your life is going to kill somebody in your family?
So that takes me to an interesting point then, because when you and I spoke last and I asked you about your reaction the day after, the day you got the news, you went to, you knew. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I'd like to get more into what you've been doing since then and dwell on this a whole lot less.
Yeah, perfect.
Because you made a statement that, this doesn't happen in our family. We've known him for 17 years, but yet the day that you got the news, you knew. You had your reaction was
well,
what?
What's really strange is I was up at 6:15. 6:15 in the morning is when we got that phone call.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I'm in the kitchen, I hear my mother, a scream out of my mother that I don't know what it was. It was such an unusual scream.
Something you've never heard before. You couldn't tie anything to that because you hadn't heard it before.
Just like something so bizarre. I ran back to their bedroom, and she was standing on her knees on her bed, and she had the phone in her hand. And she says, Nicole is dead. Nicole is dead. Nicole is dead. And I just go, what? I grabbed the phone from her, and I said, who is this? At first, I thought it was a prank.
Right.
It was like, who is doing something like this, we just left her the night before.
Right, you had dinner the night before, sure.
Right. And, we said our goodbyes, we said our I love yous, because that's how we left.
Right.
Every time we saw each other, every phone call, I love you. We'll see you soon, you know. And all of a sudden, this person on the other end of on the telephone is telling my mother that my sister had been killed.
Wow.
And I grabbed the phone and I said, who is this? He says, Tom Lang. Okay. And Detective Tom Lang.
Sure.
And I said, and then he says, your sister's been killed. And I just lost it. I think all of a sudden it was chaos. Chaos erupted in our house.
Sure.
I ran back. I grabbed my son. I was screaming through the house, and I was like, I couldn't believe what was happening.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the news was on, and murder of Bundy. I was like, oh my God. It gives me friggin' chills.
Sure.
Just even thinking about it. And the way that this whole thing is played out. I wish people would remember that these are real families.
Absolutely.
These are real human beings.
That's part of why I wanted to talk to you today. That your story is much more than just what happened on that night and your reaction the next day. It's so much deeper than that.
And they're making movies after movies and fiction, nonfiction.
Right.
Whatever these people want to do, they're doing it, but they just don't even think that there are people that are involved and feelings.
Right.
And, kids,
yeah,
her daughter,
absolutely. Her kids were in
her son,
sure.
my mother,
yeah.
my father's not around anymore, but he he's rolling around in his grave. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, all of this stuff is just horrific
Right.
because they don't think. There is no sympathy, empathy, whatever you want to call it, because
exactly.
it just really just gets to me because all they care about is making money.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, there are people that are involved
These are
in
real
all of
lives.
this. Yeah. People with hearts, people that had feelings.
Right.
So
Well, you hit it. So the name of our podcast is From the Heart. You just kind of touched on it. So the heart. So I'd like to now shift gears if we could. And obviously, you know, the rest is well documented and we don't need to go into that at all.
Yeah,
so what I'd like to do now is just really, first of all, it seems like an obvious question, but how has that incident or that event or that history in your life changed the trajectory in your family? You talked about almost the white picket fence family that you grew up in.
Right.
And certainly you've all done work now to bring awareness to mental health and to bring awareness to depression and to violence and so forth.
That's my sister Tanya does a lot of that.
Yeah, I read that. That's
a lot
great.
of work, yeah.
I think that's wonderful. What would you tell somebody that suspects in their own family now that maybe there's something going on that's not right? What advice might you have for a brother, a sister, because you're the sister in this particular situation?
Ed, I still get emails to this day, 25 years later.
Yeah.
Of what do I do? What do I tell them? What can I say? And you know, I mean, there's so many red flags when it comes to domestic violence.
Okay.
You know, like just the small stuff. Why are you wearing that color lipstick? Why are you wearing that short skirt? What, you want to be? Who do you want to impress?
Well, you're wearing the long sleeves on a hot summer day or something.
Well, yeah,
perhaps,
I mean,
or,
anything
sure.
like that. So that there's always these like little put downs and these little digs.
Okay.
You know, so all that kind of stuff. Okay, sometimes maybe you're not dressed appropriately and you say, you know, could you just go change, honey? You know, we need to have, this is a black tie affair. You need to have a long dress on. Okay, that's a normal relationship.
Yeah, that's any
normal
husband and wife conversation, sure.
Exactly. But to constantly be berated because of what you wear and how you look and who you talk to and, you know, what you say and, you know, that kind of stuff and
Right.
constantly put down and put down because of that. And all of a sudden, you know, I mean, these subtle little things turn into these bigger things because there's the cycle of domestic
Sure.
violence. And that cycle is about power and control.
Yeah.
And it's one human being over another. So it doesn't matter if it's sister to sister.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's brother to sister or
Sure.
sister to brother or
Father to
aunt to
daughter or
uncle,
whatever the case
father,
may be,
daughter.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's about power and control of one human being over another.
Okay.
The verbal, the emotional,
Sure.
the psychological, the put downs, the chipping away at somebody's self-esteem. And all of a sudden that person thinks that they're completely worthless and that they're no good.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what did I do wrong in this relationship?
Sure.
Okay, and so they truly believe, they're brainwashed into believing that it's their fault. Every action that an abuser takes is the victim's fault.
Yeah. There's a word for victim, but there's not a real word that we all use for. There's harmer, there's abuser, there's monster, but
Monster.
victim. There's
I
one
call
word.
them a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that hypothetical scenario, anybody who's watching or listening today may suspect that their daughter, for example, is being victimized.
Right.
Are there questions that you think are safe questions that you can ask versus questions that you don't want to ask? Because you certainly don't want to make her feel, again, more like a victim or more like it's her fault.
You don't want to alienate her either.
Exactly.
Okay, you don't want to say, okay, if you don't leave now, I'm never talking to you again.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a lot of times, you know, younger kids, the younger generation, they'll just go, oh my God, she doesn't listen. Then she goes back to this guy. You have to be there for that person through this whole duration. You may not like what is happening because they go back to the abuser 7 to 10 times.
Okay.
You know, so you may not like what's going on, but don't alienate them. Don't make them close that door because then they'll never come and
Just
talk
make
to
them
you
feel
again.
safe.
Make them feel safe. Make them feel actually comfortable
Okay.
that they can come and speak to you. Because if they don't have anybody to turn to, that's when all of a sudden they're just isolated.
Right.
And isolation is a huge part of domestic violence
Sure.
as well.
That just feeds the shame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to ruin their reputation. I don't want to ruin their job. I don't want to ruin, you know, their life because, you know, this is my fault because
Right.
they've been brainwashed into thinking that this is their fault. So,
Exactly.
I mean, it's really complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an easy thing. Yeah. And especially when I keep, even 25 years later, I am getting emails from people that are being re-victimized in courtrooms.
Sure.
So
it all hashes up
it's
again.
like, oh gosh, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
And it comes up for you again too, I'm sure.
all the time.
I mean, here we're talking about it, but I mean,
Yeah, all the
yeah,
time.
it's definitely something that unfortunately has kind of created a stigma, even with your family, and a definition.
Yeah.
Can you share any stories with us of maybe some hope or some good news? Anything that you've seen where?
Good news.
Yeah,
There's some
let's
good things
sprinkle
out
some pixie
there.
dust on this for a
Yeah,
moment and just say, you know,
exactly.
maybe awareness that's come to you and your family, or maybe a woman that you've noticed that because of your experience, you can see that maybe her life has changed as a result of maybe things that you've done or shared, or maybe others
Well, and
that you've seen.
I do get emails like that.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
I
good.
mean, thank God for Nicole has saved my life. You know, everything that Nicole went through and everything that you're talking about, you know, has saved my life. And so, I mean, those are things that keep you going.
Yeah.
And every time I travel someplace, I always go to a shelter. I want to go to a shelter and I want to see those women in that
Interesting.
shelter. I want to see the men in the shelters because a lot of them, for years, Ed, they did not take boys over the age of 13 in the shelters because some of them were 6'3".
Yeah, how can I be a
They're
victim if I'm
big,
6'3"? Right,
but yet
exactly.
they're kids because they're only 13 years old.
Exactly.
So that whole thing, in many cases, in many places, has changed. So they are taking care of these, you know, these older boys as
Yeah.
well, and they are allowing them into the shelters, which I think is a great thing because they're kids.
Sure.
They're the woman's kid. The victim who is going there, who needs the help, they're her children. She's not going to leave those children behind with an abuser.
Exactly.
She's taking them with her. So, you know, I think the whole cycle has to, or the mindset of a lot of these shelters has to change. And then you've got the victims that
Right.
go in there that have animals. You know, you got to remember them too
Exactly.
because those are there four-legged babies.
Absolutely. What do I do
Yeah.
with my cat or my dog?
What am I going to do? I'm not leaving them behind because you know what? Remember that movie, Fatal Attraction?
All too well. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is a reality.
Absolutely.
That kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some sick people out there. And, okay, so the hope side of it is
Yeah.
there's a 24-hour domestic violence national hotline
Okay.
that started
And
after
we'll make sure that we
Nicole's
put that
murder.
information on our show notes so that people can see what that is. If they're watching or listening today, they
Yeah.
can know where to reach.
Absolutely. I mean, they have helped millions of people, you know, get to the shelter. They're out of Texas. And I went and I toured that, and that was wonderful. That happened because of Nicole.
Yeah,
You know,
good.
it was like a year after Nicole. Then there was the Violence Against Women Act. Our ex-Vice President Joe Biden, I don't know, what do we call
Yeah,
him?
what is he now? Potential
I
presidential
love
candidate
him.
Joe Biden? Sure.
Yeah, well, whatever. But I mean, he was such a good man, and he invited me to come to Congress. He invited me to come to Washington, along with Arlen Specter.
Mm-hmm.
And what we needed to do was get Senate appropriations because the funding for these shelters was stalled in Senate appropriations.
Okay.
So I went there and I figured, okay, how do we get people's attention? How do we do this?
Right.
We named names.
Yeah.
We did. We named the
You
names of
personalize it.
congressmen that did not want the Violence Against Women Act to pass.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my gosh, are they going to throw me in jail? What's going to happen to me? I don't know. But that was probably the best thing we could have done because we were able to get, instead of the $18 million that they were asking, we were able to get $32 million for shelters.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a wonderful thing.
Sure.
Police officers, they were able to go in and do their job the way they were supposed to. Go in there, arrest somebody. That got a little convoluted there for a while because they were arresting both people, and sometimes they still do because there's scratches on them.
Yeah.
But you know what they need to do is they need to be educated. Once they're educated on who the actual aggressor is, then you'll know who you have to
Yeah.
arrest.
There's a lot of he
Yeah.
said, she said, certainly.
There
They'll
is.
come to the door and they'll be,
Yeah.
you know, I've heard stories of a woman who has called the police and then the person who answers the door is maybe another policeman or a celebrity or a fireman or something, and the men at the door are like, wow, you're so-and-so, and
Exactly.
how could you possibly do this?
But
And
you
they
got to
obviously-
remember, they're people just like we are.
Right.
They put their pants on just like we do. They put their
Exactly.
shirts on just like we do.
Yeah.
They are just people. And they are people that can do just about anything,
Yeah.
you know, when the situation comes to push or shove. So it's, There is hope.
Yeah.
I just want people to know that if they hit you once, they will hit you again.
Okay.
And if they ever threaten to kill you, eventually one day they will.
Take it seriously.
Take it seriously. Get out. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE.
Okay.
And call them. Get out of that relationship. And I can't tell you how fast to run.
Yeah.
But go. Because
Excellent.
it's not going to get any better.
So if there's one takeaway, one thing that you've learned just from 1982 through to 94 and beyond that
Oh God, one?
I know. There's 100. But first thing that comes
Yeah.
to your mind, is there anything in particular that maybe you and the family have talked about, if only we would have, or
No.
I'm so glad so there's no regret with what you didn't do, right?
I can't go to the would have, could have,
Nothing
should
you could have
have.
done, yeah.
I can't go to the guilt because we didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So if you don't know about something, you cannot feel
Right.
guilty about something. Now that I know about
That's
it,
great advice.
yeah, now that I know about it, are you kidding me? I would have dragged her out of there by her hair.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, they do say,
Yeah.
wait, I got to tell you this story.
Please.
It was a wonderful story. A woman, she totally contradicted me. She says, Denise, that's not true. Because I said, you can't physically remove somebody out of a domestic violence relationship. She says, I have to tell you. She goes, I did it. I grabbed my daughter and I told her she was never going back again. I watched her and I was not going to let her go.
Wow.
And I said, I am so glad you told me this because I always thought everybody was like, no, you can't physically remove anybody. And this lady, she just totally called me out on, you can. And I just thought, oh, I love this.
That's good.
I loved
Absolutely.
it. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah.
How often that happens, I've only heard it once.
It's not 100%. It's not 100% or 0%. It's certainly.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, she did it. She saved her daughter's life. She got her out of the abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
That's excellent. Good for
Yeah.
her. That's great.
So that was like
So
that.
that's
was
one
like
of those
something
stories you've
great.
heard that makes you feel good. Absolutely. Well, as you know, the name of the podcast is From the Heart, and the reason that we launched this is ultimately the goal is to talk about what is in your heart as you think about, as we kind of wrap up, and I really appreciate you sharing what you've shared. This is just really, for me, it's eye-opening. It helps me to see, things that I may be looking for in the future. And, I work at a very large institution, and there's a lot of people out there who work for large companies. And, before I wrap and ask you that final question, what would you say to somebody who is in a workplace who may suspect that an employee, legally, we can't just walk up and say, is everything okay? But I mean, are there things that you would tell an employer to look for in their employees or coworkers or what have you?
Are they showing up at work?
Okay.
Okay. I have to kind of. There's a couple of phases to this thing.
Sure.
Because oftentimes the corporations, they're so big, they only think about their bottom line. Okay. There's people that only think about money.
Right.
Okay. That is. Okay, the one thing that I can talk to them about, because if your employee is not showing up at work, it is costing your bottom line.
Absolutely.
If they're constantly in the hospital or constantly, out, you're still paying these people and you're not getting your work done. So take that into consideration.
Sure.
If nothing else, if you don't care about the people that work for you,
Care about the bottom line that's being
care about
impacted
the
by
bottom
this. Sure.
line. Exactly.
Okay.
But I really wish that people would care about, the people. And,
Sure.
a lot of corporations, a lot of HR departments are putting domestic violence questionnaires together and putting questions into that when somebody is coming into the department.
Yeah.
So they are moving forward and they are doing a lot of good things to actually help and to fight domestic violence.
Okay. Is there anything that you hope that they would do that they're not doing yet? I know you talked about the appropriations and the money that came from Congress and so forth to make the changes. But is there anything out there now that you're still either lobbying for or hoping for that maybe we can help get that message out to make some additional changes to protect those that may be suffering from this?
I don't know if you really want to go into my answer to that one.
Well, it's your opportunity.
Oh, I don't know if you want to hear that because then it gets really political.
Okay.
But anyway, I think that a lot of it stems from the top. And I think that if we have a bully at the top, I think it's really not a good example to teach a lot of these abusers, which are also bullies. And I think bullies are, allow other people to become bullies and to bully other people, be it another man, be it another woman, be it whoever. Bullies just are not good.
We learn from behavior that we watch.
Yes. And
whether we're children or adults, we learn from the behaviors that we see.
Yes. So parents, political figures, you name it, bosses, if they're bullies, you're going to have a horrible working environment.
Okay. Let me ask you this.
Oh, God.
What's your son's name?
Sean.
Sean. What do you tell Sean about his Aunt Nicole, and what do you tell him about when he becomes a father?
He is a father.
Okay, great. Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Your
he
grandma.
is a father.
What do you tell him about how to treat his wife and his kids, and what do you teach him about his aunt that he never met, or that he may have met but at a very young age?
Yeah, she passed away passed away. I hate when I say that.
Right.
She didn't pass away. She was murdered.
Yeah.
She died. She did not pass away from any disease.
Wasn't cancer.
It wasn't anything like that. So, cut that part out, please.
That's okay. Yeah.
It's like, what do you tell a boy? You tell a boy, you know what, just love, cherish the moments that you have with your children, with your wife, with your, significant other, a girlfriend. What do you tell a woman you tell her the same thing.
Yeah.
What do you tell your daughter? You tell them, cherish, love, be there for them, protect them, and don't let anything bad happen to them.
Yeah. Be their protector, truly their protector.
Yeah, be that protector. Be that man that, is there to protect your wife and your kids, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
The wife needs to be there and stand up for her man as well. Take advice. I think there's a lot of people in the new generation, they think they know it all. Yeah. And sorry about that, anybody, if I'm offending anybody right now.
That's
but,
all right,
they really
We're getting heads nodding and shaking, on the back, behind the cameras here.
No, but they really do think they know it all. But you know what? Take the advice from your parents, because your parents raised you.
Right.
And if they did a good job with you, what did they do that was so wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
If you're a good person.
Goes back to the learn from the experiences of others.
You learn from your parents. So if you're a good person, then you had a good role model. So take that into consideration when you get into a relationship, when you have children, and just remember, you know what? You're not always the wisest. There are people that know more than you.
Yeah.
And that have been on this earth longer than you.
Learn from, those of us who've been through the forest can talk about what's inside while others are inside it still.
I know people need to experience things.
Right.
But as a parent, you always try to protect them from certain things. They don't want to hear it. They do it on their own. And don't turn around and say, I told you so. Yeah. Even though you want to sometimes.
Right.
But, just be that loving person that you were raised to be.
Okay. How has your experience with what you went through as a family made your family closer?
Oh, God, at times it hasn't. Everybody's got their own view of all of it.
Sure.
People see things differently. Yes, in some ways we're closer, in some ways we're completely opposites. Sometimes we think one way, and again, we're all individuals.
Yeah.
So everybody's going to think differently.
Sure.
My dad thought different. My mother thought different. She was there to protect Sydney and Justin and all the kids. Yeah. So she was the protector. My father was running the foundation that we started in Nicole's name. So he was trying to educate people. I was out traveling and speaking, trying to educate people and trying to get the awareness and, education out there.
Right.
And, so there was 3 different roles right there. And, and then Dominique and Tanya, they were still, they were basically
pretty young. Right.
Yeah. And taking care of the kids or doing things with them or whatever, whatever their role was. But everybody was different.
Yeah.
And everybody grieves differently. And,
sure.
And,
some do it in anger, some do it in denial.
I was angry for 13 years, Ed.
Absolutely.
13 years it took me to get over it. Yeah. Not even over it. I'm not even
you're
over
not over
it
it today, of course, yeah. But to get to the point where you didn't wake up consumed in the thought.
No,
yeah.
Not anymore.
You could actually wake up and have a life.
13 years it took for that.
Wow.
Because I was consumed.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody goes, God, she's so angry. And I go, yeah.
Walk a mile in my shoes and talk about how you feel, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. How are Sydney and Justin doing? How old are they now? And how's life been for them? Obviously, and essentially losing both parents. I mean, their dad's around, but he's not.
He's around now. So, you know what? They're actually really good.
Yeah, good.
I mean, they could have really fallen off the deep end, but they're really,
well,
really
that a lot
good.
says for the family that surrounded them. I know a lot of it was public, but also a lot of private that none of us know about, but I'm sure they were surrounded with love.
Oh, they were, always.
Yeah, good.
So,
excellent.
that's all good.
So talk to us about the Elite Speakers Bureau and some of the things that you do there.
Well, the Elite Speakers Bureau is now called Elite Speakers International.
International, right, I saw that.
And
I think my face might be on that website somewhere.
Yeah.
It was at one point, sure. Yeah.
Well, we brought it back to cause related. And the causes, we've got speakers that are talking about domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, suicide prevention, just all the different causes that you would want to talk about. And that all started because I was just one person and I was traveling so much. And I said, well, God, how can we get other people out there? How can we get other voices to be heard? So I figured, okay, let's start a speakers bureau.
Awesome.
Let's try this and see what happens. The corporate side of it was more challenging. So that's why we brought it back to, the cause related.
Yeah.
But the website is elitespeakersinternational.com.
Okay. We'll put that up there as well. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
because
you bet.
Everybody needs to be heard. There's lots of great, speakers out there that are talking about it. It's not just me.
Right.
I mean, I'm just one little small part of it that's doing my job.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of really intelligent, wonderful people out there that can get their stories out there, or a story, or educate somebody, and educate a corporation, educate a business, educate the military, educate just anybody and everybody. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do.
Is there a way, you have a Twitter handle or Facebook page or something that people could look at, or to get information to you, or just look at what? I'm not asking for your personal cell phone number by any stretch, but
through the Elite Speakers International.
Yeah.
EliteSpeakersInternational.com is a way to get in touch with me. Okay. I don't know my whatever handle.
That's fine. They can reach out to us too. From the Heart. We have Denise's information as well, and we will certainly share.
I do have Instagram.
Okay.
I do have Facebook.
Okay.
I do have LinkedIn.
Yep.
Do I know what any of that
what
stuff
your handle
is?
is? No.
I have no clue.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I do go out there and check it every once in a while, and I'm not a social media savvy person.
Right.
So, this was all brand new to me.
Yeah. No, this is
great. So thank you for having me.
This is step one to the Denise Brown podcast, potentially.
Gosh. There you go.
Excellent.
Who knows what the future brings, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to learning more about what Elite Speakers International is doing, some of the different directions you've gone since we talked about it several years ago.
Yeah.
And if there's anything we can do to give you that forum as well, that would be great. We'd love to do that.
Perfect.
All right.
I will accept it. I will never say no.
Absolutely.
My mom always said, say thank you.
There you go. I like it. That's good. That's good advice.
Yeah.
I told my kids the answer is no until you ask. It might still be no when you ask, but it's no until you ask. You need $20, it's no. Go. If you don't ask, I'm not going to just hand you $20.
I'm not a mind reader.
Awesome. Exactly. Yeah. So the last question for you before I let you go. So if I lean right back on the pun intended on my name, but the name of our podcast here is From the Heart. So if you just had one last message on anything, it doesn't even have to be what we talked about today. What's in your heart?
What's in my heart today?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I don't know.
See, there you go.
There's a lot. It's full.
Sure. Yeah, it is full.
My heart is full.
You've got a great relationship. You've got a great life now.
I do. And, I've got a great man in my life, so I'm very blessed with that. I've got my mother still. My father's no longer with us, but, my mother is still with me, and so I'm blessed about that. I've got my sisters. I've got my son, the grandkids, the family, so they're all healthy.
What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? Okay. Vacation?
Amen. Coming up on that time.
Yeah, no, I've actually I go to Italy every summer. Yeah. I mean, I still work, but when I'm over there, but I just, that's my kind of reprieve.
Sure. One last thing I forgot to ask you about, and we can edit this or pull it in earlier, or wherever we put it, or maybe use it in another, soundbite or what have you. October, you mentioned to me, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about that, and this will air after October, which might be good because it gives attention to this not just in 1 month.
Well,
but talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and that's something that I always say because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. All these organizations and people do things during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I say domestic violence should be recognized every single day of the year. And, so keep it going, keep the talk going, keep the education going. Don't just stop because October's finished.
Yeah, exactly.
Because domestic violence is going to continue.
Yeah.
So let's just continue talking about it.
Excellent. Denise, thank you so much. I know that this is not, I try not to rehash, the past, but it's nice to be able to talk about what you're doing going forward. And if this, my goal coming into today was if there's one person who may be suffering from domestic violence and they hear you and they hear your story and they just hear the advice that you have and have shared with us today, that maybe they will have the courage to make a phone call to a loved one or be able to figure out where to go. You've given some phone numbers and we've talked about websites. And again, we'll put that in the notes on this podcast.
Yeah.
That someone will either have the courage to get out of that situation or maybe a family member or a close friend or employer or coworker will have the courage to say the right thing. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing what's in your heart with us today. And it's just really good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, Denise.